Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the GTM Insider. I am very, very excited to be joined by Daphne Costa Lopes. I believe it's nearly 10 years in the world of customer success. Is that right? And coming up to 6 years at HubSpot. And also the founder of the This Is Growth community, podcast, and newsletter. So excited to dive into how we're seeing customer success becoming a key revenue driver for organizations. But yeah, Daphne, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story before we dig in.
Yeah, Rory, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. Yes, it's over 10 years in customer success, believe it or not. I was early through the doors. And yes, it's hard to believe that 6 years nearly at HubSpot. I say to people that it's like every year in HubSpot, it felt like a completely different company to work for. When I started in HubSpot, we had less than 100,000 customers. Our customer success team in EMEA was just starting off, and we are now serving over 250,000 customers. And we have a very, very robust customer success organization worldwide. So it's genuinely felt like totally different phases of an organization. Every year felt like my job, even if I had the same job title, every year the job was significantly different. So that's what, kept me around and keeps me around, challenged, which is awesome. And like you said, I do have This Is Growth, which is my passion project. Customer success is something that really is near and dear to my heart. And when I first started in customer success 10 years ago, there was literally no knowledge out there on how to do customer success processes, customer success technology. There was so little available. And what I did was I reached out on LinkedIn to people who were in customer success and maybe were in leadership positions at the time. And I asked them for advice. And what I was met with was an incredibly generous group of people who shared so much with me. They met me for coffees, they jumped on virtual calls with me, they shared their playbooks. And it's because of those early people that were able to help me that I've come this far in customer success. There's no like customer success college that you can go and learn how to do this. And one of the things that I've tried to do is give back the same way people helped me at the start. I want to help the community up level their practice and do customer success better in their organization. So it started as like genuinely that intention. The intention continues to be the same. I want to help people build and scale their customer success teams. And we're now a community of over 17,000 people that read the newsletter weekly. And yeah, I'm never not amazed by the fact that the community continues to grow this way. But yeah, super, super proud of the work that we're doing there.
You should be. And for anyone wanting to check it out, it is thisisgrowth.com. Would highly recommend it. And with that, you mentioned being at HubSpot, overseeing customer success across globally for them. That's a lot of pressure. And you mentioned each year there's all these new challenges. What have you seen, especially in the last year, that's top of mind for you guys?
Yeah. So the piece of customer success that I oversee at HubSpot is what we call strategic accounts, which are our biggest accounts globally. And we've been in a period of transformation, I would say. Like if you look at historically how people think about servicing their largest customers, their enterprise companies, is a really high touch model, right? With a dedicated resources. Sometimes it's not just a CSM, but they have like a renewal manager, a technical account manager, or a solutions architect. Like there's like a pod of people actually working with this account because these accounts are really, really big. And what I've seen over the last 2 years is a transition where we're not trying to do a lesser touch or have less resources in those accounts, but we're actually starting to think about like how do we use digital motions to engage with those large customers. How do we take some of the things that are working well at scale and leverage them to drive usage, adoption, and value for those large organizations? How do we gain leverage in terms of like how our CSMs spend their time so that they can go up the value chain, so that they can do more and better work with those large customers and kind of let go of some of the lower value activities that still need to be done, but they're not, as high value as multi-threading and building deeper relationships, etc. So we're trying to merge those two things. It's like, how do you get the digital motion working for those large accounts together with moving the team up the value stream? And I would say that it's a very hard thing to do to get this right. But it's super, super worth it, because when you start seeing, let's say you have an account that has like 1,000 licenses, they have like loads of users in the business. They also have a lot of newcomers and people that leave the business, etc. Everybody's in a slightly different place in their HubSpot journey. So how do we meet them where they are and nurture them with the right content, with the right enablement, so that we can get them from where they are to the next level and the next level? So like, how do you navigate that maturity curve up? And you can't do that with CSMs. Like, a CSM cannot be inside every single user's profile, figuring out what they do and reaching out, one-on-one. They have to work at the account level. So the digital motion working under it to nurture all of those individual users that have different personas, different maturities, like the combination of those two things is like rocket fuel. If you have all the account work, but you don't have that kind of ground baseline of usage and adoption, then it will fall flat, right? Because it's going to be like forceful. It's going to be like tops down. It's going to be like, you guys have to use this thing, versus it being natural and bottoms up and people adopting and loving the product and pushing up like what feedback they have and what success stories they have, etc. So that's the journey that I'm seeing of transformation. It's kind of like we used to have this two totally separate segments, like here's digital and here's high touch, and now we're trying to really blend the two to orchestrate a customer journey for every user in that account, and then move the CSM up the value stream on those accounts.
Nice. As you were talking through that, it sounded very closely linked to, I was reading this morning about your Eureka moment back in 2011, where you were saying about, when we deliver value to our customers, we won't just retain their business, we'll capture more of their demand. So that like impact from day one, understanding the value that you're going to have with that customer, measuring it, continuing to service it, is it sounds like you're very, very top of mind for you at HubSpot at the moment. But enabling the team with data, enabling them with the right workflows, automations, kind of being able to optimize their roles so they can be efficient and manage all of these accounts, but in a much more personalized way, which sounds like dream state. For a lot of companies, they're like, well, where the heck do I start? So, maybe in your community as well, like that's probably like a never ending conversation of how do we, how do CSMs start to manage a bigger book of business while still delivering the same level of service and experience for all of those customers. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that has been like top of mind for everyone over the last few years, based on like what's happening in the macro environment for the economy, but also like the AI, the Gen AI revolution that we're seeing. Like, everybody's thinking about how can we do more engagements, deeper engagements, better engagements, without having to continue to add headcount, so that we can, get better return on investment. And I think that there's a few things there. So for me, everything starts with your data, right? And that is where a lot of people get stuck. So for example, when we talk about journey orchestration, if we're going to talk about targeting different personas in the account with different content, with different events, etc., where does the data around who these people are, what they're interested in, what their goals are, like, where does that live? Do we have it? Is it something we can use, etc.? And if you don't have the right data, orchestrating the journey is very hard. So I always say to people that whether you are like big company, a small company, like starting with your data is kind of like the first step to being able to scale. your CS organization. But whenever I say data, obviously, like data is like a big word. I think for some companies, data is messy, really messy. And it might take them years to clean up their data, right? So what I say to people is like, don't try to go and clean up your whole database. Figure out like what is your MVP data that you need in order to run the customer success business that you want to run, right? So for example, if you want to be able to do outreach per persona, then you need to have persona information. So then the question is like, have you ever collected that data? Can you trust that data? If you haven't, then what are the mechanisms for you to go and collect it, etc. So try to like just create this bubble around like the minimum viable data that you need in order to do this stuff. It's easier when your data is centralized, right? Like one problem that you see in many organizations, especially as they grow, is that the data is everywhere. They have a CRM, they have a ticketing system, they have a product analytics system, they have like data is in a million places, and joining the dots between that data can be quite hard. So again, like how can you make sure that you have enough tools that your teams can do their work, but you're not like creating all these micro silos in your data and then you're unable to connect the dots. So create that picture of like what is the customer success process and vision that you have. What is the minimum viable data that you need to get this done? Remember that now you also have unstructured data to leverage, right? Like before we used to just be like, what are the tables and the columns and the rows? Like, no, now you have unstructured data to figure stuff out. So for example, one cool thing that we're starting to do in HubSpot is we're starting to listen to our conversations with our customers, our engagements with our customers to infer what their goals with HubSpot are. So we can have an understanding of what this customer wants to get out of our product, instead of having to go and have 250,000 conversations, which would be unsustainable. We're trying to leverage unstructured data to guide the process because we want to be value based, right? We want to understand what are the customer goals, how do we help them achieve those goals. But unless we know the goal, we can't design a process that will help them achieve that. So, I think there are smart ways to also use unstructured data as part of your minimum viable data to reduce admin and to get better information. So once you have your minimum viable data, then I think is about starting to layer business processes on top of that. And it's like, okay, what do we want to do with this customer? Like, can we take them from A to B? If we want to take them, let's say onboarding is a really important part of the customer journey. We know that when customers are not set up right, they cancel. Like I've seen that not just in HubSpot, in every company I've worked with, and every single CS leader that I've worked with outside of my day job through consulting, mentoring, etc. Like that is true for everybody. I have never seen that not be true. So if onboarding is where you're going to start off because you want to start your customers right, then like what is that onboarding process? Like what is the outcome of that process? So you want to set up your customer for success so that they have a minimum viable setup to achieve their goal. What are the steps that they take? You can infer those steps based on your knowledge and expertise of your product and how other customers have done this in the past. But if you have loads of data, you can also look at like what are the steps that the most successful customers have taken, and you can bake that into your onboarding process. So you might start there, and like business process by business process, you start layering and layering and layering until you do end up with a very robust, high complexity, high maturity customer success organization. But I think it all starts with knowing what it is that you want to achieve with your customer success team, being able to build that minimum viable data perspective that you can trust, and then layering the business processes on top of that, and always being customer centric. What is it that the customer is trying to do? This process, none of the customer success process should be about you. You are the result of doing all these things right? If you are delivering value to your customer, if you are helping them achieve their business goals, then they're going to see you as a important part of their technology stack, or if it's a service, an important part of how they do business. If you do all those things, retention and growth is what's going to come out on the other side. So obsess over delivering value first, and then figure out, like, okay, how do we connect that to our internal metrics of success, to retention, to growth? I can guarantee you they will connect. They will connect. Especially, like, there's a few problems. Sometimes people price their products wrong, and even though you deliver value, it's not value enough to justify your product. So sometimes pricing issues can be a challenge. However, if you did that right, if you did a pricing piece right, then you deliver value, and that in turn will mean that the customer will see ROI and they will stay with you.
I love that customer centricity. It's pretty much like a non-negotiable in this modern world. And you talk about like data. Then I think back, 5-10 years ago about CS, and it always felt a little bit reactive. And we followed a playbook of this is what we think we're meant to be doing because we have to have QBRs for the sake of QBRs. And so forth. But it feels like it's definitely evolved now to being more proactive, more curated, more personalized because of data and the power that can unlock. And you mentioned as well, like this value creation and identification, and that being from day one. You might know what I'm about to ask, but for it to happen from day one, it needs that sales and CS collaboration, like the hottest topic at every company. How do you bring them tighter? How do you reduce friction? How do you ensure that there's clarity of, what they've been sold and what was communicated and that kind of continued journey? How do you think about CS working closely with sales to like identify what is the value here, not just what they've bought, but what are they looking to achieve, and ensuring that that's then communicated and always kind of resurfaced as like the kind of main topic of every conversation, every catch up?
I love this question because one thing that I really think is detrimental to your business and to the customer is when we think about all of these steps as separate silos, right? It's like the marketing process, the sales process, the CS process. Like, we see them as that internally because we have to organize around, specialization, etc. However, for the customer, this is not one blocks, like 3 or 4 blocks of a journey. This is one continual journey, right? It's the journey of, I identified that I have a problem in my business, and I went out and I researched about this problem because I want to fix it. It's important enough that I want to fix it. I talked to people, I researched online and learned about this problem. Then I found a solution that I think could be a good fit. I go and I'll talk to the salesperson, or I go, if it's product-led growth, I'll go into the sales process and learn, is this the right pricing for me? Is the right packaging for me? Like, does it have the nitty-gritty requirements and details that I need, etc.? Like, I go through that process. And then once I go through that process, it's like, okay, now I'm going to get that solution up and running in my organization. I need to get my users bought in and using it. Then I want to see the result at the other end of this problem being fixed. Is one journey. It's not, 3 or 4 different blocks, not in the customer's mind, right? So if we take a customer view of this, the information between marketing, sales, and CS should be flowing seamlessly as we can. So whatever interactions this customer had with your marketing resources, that should be information that the sales team is privy of and understands. Whatever happened in the sales process, whatever promises were made to the customer in the sales process, those things should flow into customer success seamlessly. There's nothing worse for a customer than to have to repeat themselves 10 times. Like, if I spend 2 months with you, Rory, working through a sales deal, I tell you all my problems, I tell you everything about my organization, we hash out every corner of this problem together to find the right package for me. And then you pass me on to a customer success manager or an onboarding manager, and I have to just go and do that all over again. Like, that is so frustrating. And it's even more frustrating because now I'm paying you. Now you're wasting my time and my money by doing this. So it's a really, like, information transfer, those handovers and those handshakes are so important. And I think in HubSpot, how we think about this is, we think about this we create a joint evaluation plan with a customer. And a joint evaluation plan is literally this process of like, what do you need? How do we meet your requirements? Obviously, there's like a collaboration between like not just the solution, but what type of servicing do you need, or like what are your procurement steps? Like all of that those things go into the joint evaluation plan, and they get documented. And then once the sale is closed, that joint evaluation plan becomes a tool that the CSM uses to build what we call a success plan. And a success plan is basically like, okay, how are we going to take this thing that you said you wanted to do and make that a reality in the product? What steps are we going to take? How are we going to sequence our work so that you achieve that thing that you said that you wanted to do? So like the joint evaluation plan and the success plan, they're like connected by the hip, right? We want them to flow into each other. What also happens during that process is usually the person buying the product, at that point when their onboarding starts, they usually hand over to somebody on their team. Usually, if they're not a very small organization, it's like the decision maker says, now that we've bought this thing, Rory, it's your team's job to go and implement it. So not only we have a transition of internal personnel because the sales team is stepping out, we usually see a transition of external personnel as well. So if you don't have that plan to anchor the conversation, the new person that's coming in, they might tell you something different, right? Or they might not have the full visibility of what the sales conversation had been. So you might have a disconnect there. And then 3-6 months down the line, when you're meeting again with that decision maker to be like, hey, we are now fully implemented. I wanted to share with you some of the initial results that we're seeing and discuss how we can do things better, etc. That person might be surprised to see that some of the things that you agreed upon during the sales process, that hasn't been uh, uh, put in place yet when they think that that's something important. So to avoid that frustration, what I say is like, yes, the joint evaluation plan and the success plan should be like super connected. If there's at any point a question on, oh, we don't want to do that, or that's not how we do things, the decision maker should be brought in, weaved in again to help unblock, because a lot of software implementation is transformation, right? So that the leader in the business might want the team to do things differently. But then when it gets to the team who's implementing, they might be like, that's not the way that we do things today. It's like, well, of course it's not. So you're buying a new solution. You want to do things differently, right? So it's like sometimes you need the decision maker to come in and help move along the vision for what you're trying to do. But I think that's like one of the pieces. And then on the other end, I think that's the kind of like the first handshake is the handshake of the first sale. But as you're nurturing that customer, like I said, they're seeing results with you. Hopefully you have your product is expanding at the same time, you're solving new types of problems for customers, and you have opportunities to upsell and cross-sell to that customer. And if that's true to your business, then the sales team might join back in, right? In HubSpot, for example, we leverage our sales teams to do our upsells and cross-sells. We don't have a separate kind of AM team, or the CSM isn't kind of flying solo by doing that sale. So we will bring our sales team back into the conversation through what we call a success qualified lead. So we talk to the customer will say, hey, I have this new problem. And you're like, I have the right product for you. Here's like what this product does, and you should really investigate it. If the customer is like lightly qualified, like if the problem exists, if they have the budget, if they're interested, we'll pass that on to sales again. And that's the other handshake. It's like giving the sales team all the information they need to then come in and upsell and cross-sell to this customer. So the handshake will continue to happen in both ends, because if the customer buys again, then there's another implementation, and then there's so that cycle continues hopefully for a very long time with that customer. You have them for years and years to come, and your product will continue to grow, and that becomes a really strategic relationship for your business.
You almost answered my next question then, which was going to be around how do you what strategies do you think about for proactively tackling churn or reducing churn?
Honestly, the best way to reduce and prevent churn is to deliver value to your customer. That's the number one strategy, because if you are selling something to the customer and they're not seeing value on the other side, you're in the chopping block, right? If I am the leader in that team and I'm responsible for the P&L and budget, or if I'm the CFO and I'm looking at your technology budget and I'm looking for places to cut costs, my first question to you would be like, what can you do with that? Like, what are the technologies that you have here? What are the people that you have here that are not delivering at the level that we need to? And if at any point your solution is on that list of like nice to have or like underperforming solutions, like you're gone, right? So value is the best and the safest way to continue to renew a customer. It's much better to have a conversation about pricing from a position of delivering value. So let's say the customer still needs to cut costs, right? Like even though your product is delivering a ton of value, they come to you and they're like, we have a mandate to reduce cost by like 10% for next year. I have to reduce from somewhere. If your product is delivering value, right? The conversation will be very different. It will be, well, you can't do without us, right? So like, let's find a solution here. Is there anything in the product that we can help you remove if it is not genuinely something you're not using, or is there like a discounting that we can work with you on, like if you can commit for longer terms or if you can commit to a growth path with us, etc. So you're negotiating from a position that nobody's asking whether this product is necessary. We're trying to figure out like what's the right number to continue to do business. If you're negotiating from a position of, we actually don't need this, like we don't, like then you're repitching is a new sale. You have to resell this product to the customer, which is going to be much harder. So I would say that's like number one, insurance policy. This is how you deliver value, and your retention will come. Now, the other thing I think it's really important, it's like delivering value, it's like a big word. Like I said, onboarding. Onboarding is like if your customers are not onboarded properly, like that, those first like 30, 60 days, like they're so important because you either lose their hearts or win their hearts at that time. So if you can onboard your customers quickly to your product, and I think that's where AI products are really gaining the hearts of people, is how quickly people can get up and running with them. Like you plug in an AI summary, a call recording, etc. to it starts delivering value now. Like literally first call, delivering value already. So like the quicker you can make this cycle of like implementing and for people to get to the aha moment and receive value back, the better. Then the other thing is usage. I know people like frown upon usage a little bit. Like, people are like, high usage doesn't mean somebody's getting value from the product, which is true. However, the opposite is true. Like if nobody's using it, then there is absolutely no way they can get value from your product. So usage is still really important. So once you onboard the customer, monitoring how they're using your product and always pushing the envelope. You want them to use more. You want them to see more value. So it's like, okay, if you have one use case deployed right now, how can we deploy the second use case? If your users are not logging in as frequently as we'd like them to and doing activities that we want them to do, how can we get them to do them? Like obsessing over usage, I still think is a really valuable strategy for driving retention in a business. And then like there's small things, Rory, like I think like having a good renewal process, like the not just waiting until like in month to go out and notify your customers about their renewals, give people time, place the right resources to negotiate with customers in those windows, etc. Forecasting, like know your risks ahead of time. No, like if you forecast, like we forecast 6 months in advance in my team. So I know all renewals that are happening in the next 6 months. Like I know where they're at. Is there risk? Because if there's risk, then we have 6 months to work on that risk, right? We have enough time to turn a situation around. If you're forecasting a month, like if you're forecasting this month for next month, like you have 30 days to change that picture. It's not enough time. Not in the retention world, because results take a little bit more time than that to demonstrate to the customer. So I would say like a strong forecasting motion that's driven by data right? It's not just sentiment from CSMs. It's not just like, here's what I think is going to happen. It's like, how are they using the product? Are they getting value from the product? Like if you can have like numeral metrics for those two things, if you can have usage being either a score or a percentage, like something that can help you understand like what good looks like, and then value as being a value metric of your business. I'll give you an example of value metric in HubSpot is if you are if you're a marketing customer, you buy HubSpot because you want to generate demand, right? That's one of the use cases. What tells us that you're generating demand is that you're generating leads for your business. So we are measuring leads and we're looking at is where are you with that? Like, is that moving positively, negatively over time, etc. So like finding like what are those value metrics that your business can have, and you don't need a million of them, you need a few of them that you can monitor that can help tell the story of whether this customer is getting value. So then you have usage, you have value, and then you can have like a CSM prediction on top of that. You can say like, based on the conversations I'm having with the customer, based on what's happening inside that organization, whether they got their funding, didn't get their funding, like all that kind of nuanced stuff, then the CSM can come in and put their prediction, and you will have a very good, um, strong book of business management motion that will help you drive retention very proactively.
Nice. And with that, are you also relying on your joint evaluation plans to predict churn or think about like the overall engagement between CSM and their main point of contact?
Yeah, like those success plans that we're talking about, right? Like if you as a customer, if you're not completing that success plan, so let's say it's like you have an outcome that you're looking for, and on the other side you should have a verified outcome. Like, here's what I told you I wanted to achieve. I followed the plan. I got the thing. Like, that's like outcome, verified outcome. So those verified outcomes are one of the ways that you can use to actually measure whether a customer is likely to stay. In HubSpot, we're not using verified outcomes right now because we have value metrics that we're super bullish about. We understand and we measure our business using those value metrics. But I know a lot of businesses that use verified outcomes, and that is like, you told me you wanted to increase productivity by 10%, and then in 6 months we're going to come back to you and we're going to like we had a baseline for that metric, and now we're going to go back and we're going to measure that again and we're going to compare to the baseline and etc. So a lot of businesses do that as well, which I think it's an awesome way to understand whether you're in the right direction with that customer.
Awesome. And we've kind of covered like value generation or like ideation, and identifying it from day one, like collaboration with sales to CS, like thinking about churn. But the other like piece of all of this is CS being a revenue generating organization in itself. And I think especially since the pandemic, everyone kind of woke up to people aren't buying software as much as they used to. And, things have slowed down. Like, where do we get revenue? Oh, wait, we've got this existing customer base. And you and your teams were probably like, finally, people have woken up to the power of, like serving our existing customers and growing with them and everything like that. Yeah, like how do you think about not the evolution, but I think the kind of identification or realization of CS as a revenue generating part of the business?
That feeling of like finally is definitely how I feel. I love that the leadership teams, the sales teams, like that people are waking up to the power of the install base. What I think people mistake sometimes is being revenue generating with being salespeople, right? And those two things are different, especially in the world of customer success. So, first of all, I think every customer success team should have a metric of success, a North Star metric that is a dollar value. Every single success team should have that, whether that's going to be retention at a dollar value or whether that's going to be growth at a dollar value or both, right? I like both. I think both are important. So every customer success team should be able to attribute their activity to how it's impacting the business from a financial standpoint. What I don't like is the knee-jerk reaction of transforming customer success managers into account managers to try and get them to become salespeople. The reason why I don't like this is in the short term, that tends to work, right? So in the short term, what happens is you have a big pool of healthy customers that are seeing value that you can sell to. So when you make that transition and you're like, let's just go sell into those customers, you go out and you have a lot of healthy customers to sell to, right? The problem is in the medium to long term, what happens is the CSMs that were moved into more account management kind of sales type roles, they're no longer driving success with the existing install base. So over time, your healthy customers, like they continue to grow, but the bucket of customers who you didn't support to get to that point starts to increase. So you have a bigger risk bucket in your business and a lesser healthy pipeline to go pitch for. And then, so in the short term, it works and you oversell, you upsell a bunch. But then in the medium to long term, you start seeing that pipeline drying out because actually you end up having a lot of customers that are not seeing value, customers that didn't implement well, customers that are having issues, technical issues, things like that. And I think in the long term, it becomes a worse thing for revenue to do that. My favorite thing to do, and I think the way I've seen work best is when the CS team is focused on generating the leads for the sales team. And the sales team is then the people who are actually closing those deals. That means that the CSM has to nurture an account to the point that they're seeing value, that they're successful, that they're happy to have a conversation about growing their business. And they have that success qualified lead as a metric. And then the sales team comes in and do what they do best. They sell to that customer, which is also a different skill set. It's a Venn diagram. There's a lot of skills that are very similar between sales and CS, but there are skills that are distinct. So I think like having that specialization of work, like the people who are, their sole focus is to make sure the customers are successful so that they are in a position to buy more for new business, and then having somebody that sole focus is to convert those opportunities into dollars for the business. That's my favorite model. I do think, the AI is changing the game a little bit. Like when you think about, I think we're expecting people to have a much bigger breadth of what they can do. So roles are starting to merge more. In HubSpot, we've started using the term super contributor. It's like somebody who is an individual contributor, but has like this breadth that, and in many cases has like one or two places where they have deep expertise. So I think as we start to deploy more and more of these technologies, maybe we're going to see the role and the scope of the customer success manager being expanded, the role and scope of sales being expanded, and that Venn diagram will start to become like more and more like one circle. But as of right now, what I see playing out on the field today is that delivering value is a full-time job and converting value is a full-time job. So those two things being separate right now works really, really well.
That's interesting. It really resonates with some things that we're speaking about in the team at the moment. So thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned AI. I think it's rare on podcasts these days. AI doesn't become the center of attention. But and you mentioned kind of like thinking forward. So as we wrap up, like what skills do you think will be make or break for CS teams in the next? People say 5 years, but I think that's way too far ahead with the rapid pace of tech and AI. I'd say maybe in the next kind of 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. So we're going to see as what I'm telling my team and how I'm thinking about even my own career, right? Is I'm telling people that like if you think about like skill set as a spectrum, and for CSMs, in one side you have the CSM that is deeply relational, embedded into the customer's organization, like has that strategic influence and is multi-threading. Like if you have that CSM, And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have a highly technical CSM, like somebody that's like deep into the technology, the product, the systems that connect to the product, the data infrastructure. Like if you have those two ends of the spectrum, right? And then you obviously have the middle where people kind of go navigating somewhere. For me, the middle will be gone. I call it the mediocre middle, which is like you're not that great at that, you're not that great at that. You're kind of just like managing the process, managing the CS process. You're not really excellent in either side. I think that's going to be gone. It's going to be taken by AI because AI is really good at general topics, automizing things. If you do something repeatedly and you know that like that thing is the way to solve that problem or that's the best path to resolution, etc., that is all going to be taken over by AI and is already being taken over by AI. If we look at our colleagues in support specifically, that is already like, some of our customers in HubSpot in our support product, they see up to 90% of ticket resolution completely done by AI without losing CSAT, without losing customer satisfaction in this process. So it's like that low complexity, high repeatability, like that is going to be gone. So what we're going to be left with the both bookends of like this role. And it's going to be either the CSM whose sole job is strategic influence, and then CSM whose sole job is to be deeply technical. That's where I think we're going to be left with in the CS world. And I think obviously it's every person has a preference for what end of the spectrum they fall. Do they like more the technical side? Do they like more the leadership and human and side? Which is why I said to you, like part of the CS role might be very similar to sales as we deploy these technologies, because that strategic influence piece, like that is very similar to how a sales person would be working, thinking, engaging. So I think that's kind of the direction that we're going with CS. And for me, like some of the most important skills is, well, first of all, adaptability. Like if you're not taking on this technology, whether it's because you are afraid that it's going to take your job, or it's because you're a little bit overwhelmed by it, it's very new, or you don't have time, you have like a very demanding job and you're like, how am I going to learn this? Like if you're not like flexing that adaptability and that urgency that's necessary, I think you're going to be left behind. So I think it's a really important kind of core skill. Then I think like curiosity. I know it sounds like everybody needs curiosity, but curiosity, like, because you're gonna have to go hunting for this stuff. Like nobody's gonna come and deliver to you in a platter here what here's the perfect AI system that we built for you to do the thing. Like that's not where we're at. Like we might get that in the future, but at this point, again, I think what how you can create an unfair advantage for yourself is being out there trying the stuff out for yourself and then sharing with your organization. What are the lessons? What is working? How is it helping? How is not working? Why this doesn't give the output that we need, etc. Like that will allow you to emerge as a leader in your organization. And then I think as I use more and more of the AI technologies, what I learn is that prompting is like it can make it or break it a process, right? So if you bring in, like in HubSpot, we have this incredible thing that our CS operations team built called the CS Assistant, which is basically a co-pilot for CSMs. It leverages loads of our data sources to help CSMs be more effective, prepare better, have more high value conversations, etc. If you go into something like that, obviously we build a few pre-built prompts, to help people get off the ground, etc. But if you go in there and you put in a one-liner and you say like, tell me what you do with this customer, like that is the result that comes back with, versus somebody that writes a really good prompt, a prompt that has context, a prompt that has an objective for the AI, a prompt that has a framework maybe that you want the response to come back with. Like that prompt will be a million times better. So how you use the tool, even if you're using the same tool, matters. And I think that like learning how to prompt, like no, I don't know if you need to become a prompt engineer, so in that way, but like to be a good prompter, I think it's something that's going to be, at least in the short term, until everybody's skills goes up, is transformational. And if people want a tip, one thing that I do is I write a prompt and then I ask AI to tell me if it's a good prompt. So I put my prompt, and the objective I give to the AI sometimes is to say like, help me make this prompt better. How can I make this prompt better so that I can get an answer that fits this criteria, etc. And then I get a prompt by it, like 99% of the times I get a prompt that's like so much better from the AI. So that's a tip for anybody that's trying to get better at that. But yeah, I think those are some of the things, Rory, that people are going to be they're going to need in order to succeed.
Yeah, the inception of AI, kind of using AI and then asking AI to query what you just used AI for to improve it.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, brilliant. And actually on that, if anyone's kind of feeling overwhelmed by AI, my recommendation, it might not surprise you, is to check out Dharmesh's newsletter, simple.ai. Brilliant starting point that really breaks it down into something that doesn't feel so overwhelming. But anyway, Daphne, it's been a pleasure having you on today. I've learned a ton. I'm sharing this with our team as soon as it's finished. Feel very, very grateful to have been a sponge on this episode. And I'd also recommend everyone to connect with Daphne and follow her on LinkedIn. Her content is brilliant. It's very, very inspiring and will help anyone and everyone in CS. So thank you again. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much.